goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow if I can.
Hello, it's Brian. I'm back with another video in the Middle-earth Ranger series. Today we're going to be revisiting our gear layer theory. And I'm just going to kind of give you a walkthrough of what I carry in my layer 1. So just a quick refresher. I break my gear down into layers 1, 2, and 3. Layer 1 being the essentials that you would always need for survival, combat, whatever your mission is. So your basic essentials that you always keep on yourself at all times. Layer 2 would be whatever gear you would add for a day trip, a scouting expedition, equipment that can comfortably get you through a day, could get you with marginal comfort through one night, but is not designed for an overnight trip. And then layer 3 is what you add when you're planning to stay overnight or you're going on a multi-day expedition. So when I talked about layer 1 in the last video, I talked about the essentials. So what are your basic essentials that you need to have on you at all times? So we go back to the rule of threes to decide our essentials. So just a quick recap for those of you who aren't familiar with that. The rule of threes says you can go for 3 minutes without oxygen, 3 hours exposed to extreme climate, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. Basic things that we need to protect against. The oxygen part, you should breathe. If you're in a situation where you can't breathe, get out of that situation. You got about 3 minutes. Good luck. But as it comes to exposure, right? So that's our elements. I have 3 hours of exposure to the elements. So first thing we need to do is we need to protect against exposure. The next essential is thirst. We need to have water. We need to hydrate in order for our bodies to function. So that's our next thing on our list of threes that we're going to be looking at. And then the last thing is hunger. And that's what a lot of people think of first. But if you look at that, you can go for up to 3 weeks without food. Now, will your performance be significantly reduced if you don't have food? Oh, yeah, absolutely. And especially if you're in a cold weather environment where you're burning extra calories in order to stay warm, that 3 weeks is going to start coming down significantly if you don't have food to replenish your body's stores that you're burning just to keep yourself warm and alive. But we'll touch back on that in a minute. So the things that I'm looking at are shelter and fire, which deal with exposure. Shelter starts with your clothing, but depending on what you're carrying, you're gonna go up from just your base clothing. So shelter and fire cover my exposure elements, and then I also have a container where I can boil water. I have water that I carry, period, and that covers the thirst side of things. Now, in addition to your basic survival needs for your body, you're also going to want to carry on you the tools that you would need in order to sustain yourself in the wilderness. If you are at layer 1, that's all you have, you get separated from the rest of your equipment, you need to be able to make the things you need to survive. So in addition to what I have here with the survival essentials, we're looking at Middle-earth Rangers, who are essentially a long-range reconnaissance combat patrol. So you would also want to add your weapons of choice to that. And I'm going to start there with the weapons that I have, and then I'm going to go through tools. I'll take you guys through my belt and what I carry in each of those pouches. Before I go into that, a comment on food. Food is not an essential in layer 1. Again, we can go for several weeks without actually having any additional food. However, you should never underestimate the morale benefit and the psychological effect that having food with you carries. There is a comfort that we as humans have knowing that we have some food with us, even if we're not planning to eat it. Even if we know it's just for emergencies, having that food with us is a great psychological help. So keep that in mind as you're planning your layer 1. So now we'll go into the breakdown. Starting off, let's talk about weapons. Now, if we're reading the books and we look at Aragorn, who's really the only ranger that we see in his reconnaissance style equipment, right? He's traveling through Middle-earth very lightly equipped. The only weapon that he has ever depicted as having in the books that's only mentioned, it's even very specifically mentioned that this is the only thing that he has with him, is a sword. Right? Now, if you are planning to travel in modern day wildernesses and you're doing it in your ranger equipment and you have a sword that's functional that you can carry with you, check with your local laws, make sure that that is something that you can do. And that's the first thing that I'll say about that. The second is you'll come upon the bit of a quandary that you have of, what if your sword's not functional? This is a prop sword. Is it steel? Sure, yeah, it's steel. It's even somewhat carbon steel, but it's not properly heat treated. I would not hit anything with this because I know it would come apart. This is just, it's not made for that. So for me and my mindset, would I carry this while I'm trekking as a ranger? Not necessarily. Would I carry this to like a Renaissance festival, something like that? Well, sure, yeah, I absolutely do that. But if I'm going into the wilderness, I prefer to carry things that are actually functional and serve a need. Now, some people don't. Some people will carry even a non-functional sword because it fits the part. And there are times when I have done that. But I'll show you what my current weapon of choice is that I carry when I'm out in my ranger equipment, which probably doesn't come as a surprise to anyone that follows my YouTube channel. I carry a tomahawk. I carry a tomahawk for a lot of reasons. One, it's a very, very effective weapon, especially Eastland woodlands where I live. There's not a lot of open area. It can be very, very constricted. So a sword sometimes could actually be an encumbrance, not only as you're carrying it, but also trying to fight with it. So having a shorter weapon is very useful. In addition, a tomahawk is a fantastic tool. The one that I carry does have a hammer, a functional hammer on the backside that is hardened. So it's not just a hammer-like projection, it is an actual hammer, in addition to the cutting edge. So I can use it for processing wood, I can use it for driving stakes, I can use it for splitting wood, I can use it for any number of different tasks. It's a very, very versatile tool. Now, I pair that typically with a long knife. I have several that I use. I don't have one that really fits my ranger kit perfectly. This is the one that I'm currently using. This is the Fairbairn Sykes British Commando dagger. I believe this one's made, is this Sheffield? Yeah, this one's made by Sheffield. So it's about the right size. It's about the right shape. It's approximately a medieval-ish dagger, but it's not. So that's something that I'm working on to develop with my kit. So those would be the weapon set that I would carry. Because having the tomahawk in one hand, I've got a free hand. There are a lot of different styles that use two smaller weapons. If you've watched my tomahawk videos, I do use a long knife and a tomahawk in those. I like it. It gives me options. In addition to the combat tools that those would be, the tomahawk also does move over into just a survival tool because of its multifunctionality. And I also carry a smaller knife. There's a lot of different ones that I carry as well. The one that I carry a lot is this old hickory. I don't know if I can see that. This is an old hickory paring knife that I've just kind of rehandled. It takes a very, very good edge. It holds that edge for a long, long time. It's a very thin blade. It's great for processing small pieces of wood, processing game, food, whatever it is you need a knife to do. So I do like that one. I also have a remade cold steel roach belly knife, which you've probably seen in a couple of my videos, that rides on my belt. So moving past the main tools that I carry, let's look at some of the different elements that I carry. We talked about exposure. So in my layer 1, I deal with exposure in two ways. One is the shelter component. That starts with the clothes. Now right now I'm not in ranger equipment, I'm not outside, I'm shooting in my basement. The main reason for that is noise. There's a lot of people out blowing leaves and stuff like that, and I couldn't find a quiet time to shoot. So I'm in my basement. But in addition to the clothes, my cloak, which you've all seen, this is 100% wool Melton fabric. It's quite thick. You really can't see any light through that at all if you hold it up to the sun even. This one's large enough and long enough to where I can wrap up in it as a blanket if I curl up. and it would definitely do service and has done service as a blanket in the past. Is it as good as having an actual blanket? Not really. If I was working in a colder climate than South Alabama, which is not a cold climate, if I was living in a colder climate, I would probably have a heavier wool cloak just for that purpose. But for where I live, with the skills and the tools that I also carry with me, if I had to survive overnight, I could definitely do that with this cloak. So that's part of my shelter. The other part of the shelter component for exposure would be the ability to make a fire. We'll go over that when we get to the belt kit. The other rule of three essential that we're talking about is water. So you have also probably seen, and I've done videos on this in the past, my water skin. This is just a cheap Walmart water skin that I put a cover over. This is also on my list of things to improve and make more authentic in the future. And there'll probably be a video on that whenever I choose to do it. So always carry water, and always carry the means to get more clean water. You want to be able to purify and filter your water. And those are two different things. If you use a modern filtration unit, that's going to be doing both. It's going to be filtering out sediment as well as bacteria and other things that could make you sick, viruses, etc. I do not carry a modern filter with my Ranger kit. I do carry cloth filters that will get sediment and large chunks of things out of the water, and then I boil it in order to actually purify it and kill whatever is living inside of it. So that's all that. Let's dive into the components of the belt. So here's my belt that I wear when I'm out and about. I do have 3 different pouches on this. This belt would also hold my knives and my tomahawk. Let's hold that up so you can see all the pouches. This one's new. I don't think nobody's ever seen this before. I know that because I made it yesterday. It's still a work in progress, but I was wanting a softer leather pouch for my fire kit because the leather pouch that I had, one, is really noisy because most of my pouches are this harder veg tan leather, and you can hear it. It just creaks so much. So I'm trying to transition away from that and make some quieter pouches. In addition, though, the belt loops went through the hard leather on the back and actually opened it up, so it wasn't really sealed. Now this one is still not sealed. The flap is just loose. But ultimately, I like this design, and I'm going to kind of go with that. So I've got my fire kit pouch, the pouch that runs at the back of my belt, which I call my need wallet, and then I've got just like a Sporin style pouch there. So let's start with the fire pouch. Bring that up here. So there's 2 containers that are inside. The first is just a small steel tin. It does have a hole in it so that I can make char, and I do have some charred punkwood in there. I love using punkwood to make my char because it is very porous. It catches a spark fantastically, and the ember lasts a pretty long time. I know char cloth is kind of the norm in the bushcraft community, and char cloth was used, but with this I don't have to carry cloth to make more. Finding punkwood is very easy in the area that I live in. So after I've used this up, or pretty much any time I make a fire, I can get more punkwood, I can char it, and I can refresh my tin with that. I do have a larger tinderbox that I carry in my layer 3 if I'm going out for an extended trip as well. The other thing that rides in there is just this small linen bag, right? A little linen drawstring bag. Inside that, I do have my steel striker. I have a piece of flint wrapped up, just wrapped in a piece of leather. This piece of flint has the distinction of being the first piece that I ever actually found. I have several flints that I've purchased over the years, the piece that I purchased with this kit, in fact, but I found this on a hike, and so it's kind of sentimental, so I like that. So it just gets wrapped up and put in the pouch with that. And the last thing that I have in this is quick tinder. I always like having some pre-made tinder. This is actually jute twine that's been doubled, tripled, and reverse wrapped onto itself to make these little tinder twists, essentially. They're whipped on the ends here. That's awfully bright. They're whipped on the ends here, but I could pull that off or cut that off and then fluff this out, and it makes a rather significantly sized bird's nest. And I carry two of those. There's the smaller one and a bigger one, just depending on the environment. If the wood's very dry, if I can get some dry wood and it's warmer, then I could probably use this. If it's the middle of winter, I'm going to go with a larger tender bundle just because I want that flame to last longer because it's a colder environment. These were very quick and easy to make. They pack up small, like I said, and I can just stick those down in the pouch that I carry my fire steel and my flint in. I used to carry my flint in my char tin. This is another lessons learned. One, it's loud because it clanks around, and two, somebody else pointed out in a video I was watching of theirs that it also breaks your char up and pulverizes it, and you end up with a bunch of dust, which is not really conducive to transferring an ember into your tinder bundle. So we'll probably go in more detail on that at some point if I'm ever out in the woods shooting a video and making a fire. So working our way around the belt, I'm actually going to skip the Need wallet and go straight to the Sporin style pouch. And in addition to the closure here, it also does have a drawstring at the top that I keep tied just to secure everything inside so that it doesn't flop around. I like things as tightly secured as possible. One, for noise discipline, and two, just I don't like having a bunch of stuff hanging off of me. So there are two main bundles that we have in here. First, I have this is 100% cotton, just a really thinly, or rather loosely woven but thick cotton fabric. It would make a good bandage. It's very absorbent. It makes a nice like bandana, scarf kind of piece of material. Multi-use. Always have cotton fabric with you whenever you go anywhere. And the other thing is my little tinned steel cup. This is from an old Boy Scout camping set. This allows me, one, to have something to drink water out of if I decide to warm it up, and two, I can actually boil water in this. Is this the best choice? No, it's not. It's not very big. But can I survive off of this? Yeah, I can. It's very easy to build a small fire, let it go down to coals, sit this directly on the coals. Because it's so thin and small, you can boil your water in that very quickly. So I do keep that wrapped in fabric. One, because I have the fabric anyway, and two, that muffles the sound of having that tin cup in the bag. I also keep just some leather laces. I believe it was in one of Dan Beard's books from the early 1900s where he just talks about having, they call them wang strings or something like that. I forget what it was called, but just keeping leather laces. I have a lot of different pieces of kit that are leather, that are held together with leather, and laces are useful. It's also a period form of cordage, so I just have some nice leather lace that I keep in there in case I need to wrap something up quickly. The last thing that's in this pouch is my tool roll. This is just made from cotton canvas drop cloth material. I just sewed, we'll roll that out, sewed a little pocket across the bottom, stay in gimlet, and then I just fold across the top. So I have several tools in there, as you can see, and we'll just pull those out and we'll go over what we have going on there. Let me stick this cup back in here before it falls to the ground with a great noise and clatter. So the first pocket holds my awl. Made this in a video last year. It's just a very simple tool for punching holes in leather, for gouging small holes in wood. A lot of things you can do with an awl. It's kind of a hard tool to replicate because you do need a hard piece of steel. You can make one out of bone, etc., but a good awl goes a long way, especially if you're going to be repairing leather goods or anything like that. The second thing, because I do carry several steel tools that I want to keep a fine edge on, I do have just a medium Arkansas whetstone that I keep in the pocket. One of my newest additions to my tool roll, I do have a gimlet. If you're not familiar with gimlets, you should check these out. They do a really good job of boring holes. combined with my leather lacing and my other cordage. Good for trap making, good for repairs, good for a lot of things. They drill a nice clean hole through a piece of wood with minimal effort. Would you want to build a house with one? No, again, not what it's for. But for bushcrafting, building structures in the woods, and again, really good for certain types of traps, giblet's a good tool to have. Next is this. This is a piece of river cane that has some tarred nylon line. Eventually this is going to get replaced with some waxed linen cord once I get that, but for now I have tarred nylon and it works just fine. So that's my primary cordage. This specific line tests at about 600 pounds for breaking strength, so it's quite strong. You could build it for structure building. At the end of the river cane I have a stopper, and inside the river cane there's a number of different things. I'm not going to pull them all out and show you, but just to kind of give you an example. I have a heavy sail needle. I have several smaller needles. I also have several small fish hooks. So just that little container right there gives me some heavy sewing capabilities and some fishing capabilities. The next little piece is my dedicated sewing kit. This is just a leather or a wooden spool with several different sizes and colors of natural fiber, cotton and linen thread wrapped around. There are several needles wrapped up in this. It's just wrapped in a piece of leather. It's not even a pouch. And there's that long leather lace around there. Every single piece of this could be used for repair. Even I could use the leather that's wrapping it to repair things as well if I needed to. So just a simple, basic sewing kit. Again, the more you make your own gear, the more you realize this could break in the woods. It'd be nice to be able to fix it. Sewing kit. The last thing I have is just a piece of a file. This would be for primarily for sharpening my tomahawk, but this could also be used for shaping wood. If you were trying to get a good dovetail joint on a structure that you were building and you just needed a little bit more and you didn't want to try to shave it off with your knife, you could use your file. And I have used my file to clean that off. So that's the tool roll. That's what I currently have in it. That's based off the environment that I work in. That's based off my own skill set, the things that I know that I can do with those tools, and the season. Depending on where I'm going, what I'm doing, I might trade some of those out, but for the most part, those are going to be in there all the time. I'm just going to tie this off so nothing falls out when we're going to the last pouch, which is the Needs wallet. Now the Needs wallet's kind of a tricky one. If you look at the primary sources in, I believe it's in the Unfinished Tales, there's references to the Numenorians and again to Isildur having like a sealed wallet that they carry on their belt that has Lembas and Mirovor, which are two, for lack of a better word, magical foods. Lembas is the way bread of the elves. The Numenorians had a version of that that was not quite as good, but was still better than anything that we mere mortals can produce in our modern context. So this was like a survival ration pack. Now I like the style and I like the idea, but I don't fill this with survival rations. What I do have in here are a couple of bandages. This is a gauze roll bandage. This is actually U.S. Army, one of the old style U.S. Army battle dressings. It has the long olive drab tails on it. So I have trauma dressings essentially. That's the only real first aid stuff that I carry is what's in this pouch. I also have another river cane pouch. This one is sealed with wax, and this holds medication, primarily Benadryl. One of the biggest issues that you might run into in the southern woodlands would be allergic reactions, be it to poison ivy, be it to insect stings, a lot of different things. So I always carry Benadryl anytime I go into the forest. I've also got some ibuprofen in here in case I run into a situation where I have inflammation, infection. This is not designed to be long-term. There are no places that I go and trek where I'm more than, I'd say, 4 hours walk from a major medical facility. So this is just to kind of get you through, but it's good to have. So that's all it is riding in this pouch currently. Now when I am actually going out trekking, we talked about food earlier. I actually carry, wrapped in a waxed linen, just a waxed linen piece of fabric, I carry some hardtack in here. Hardtack, not the most nutritious thing, but again, that morale, that mental thing. If I get stuck out overnight, I can break that hardtack up, I can boil it in my little cup, and I can make a soup, a dumpling soup, essentially. I can supplement that with whatever I find out in the wild. And it's just something to put something on your belly, help you feel a little bit more at home and a little more comfortable, and helps you think more clearly about the situation that you're in. The other thing that rides in this pouch is my cell phone, because if I'm out in the woods, I want to be able to take pictures. I want to be able to call for help if there's a serious emergency. So this is what hides my moderns. All right, so that is my layer 1. And one thing that I will say about gear and layers and anyone you talk to that spends time out in the wilderness, kits change. What I have in that kit is not the same stuff that I had in that kit a year ago. It's not the same stuff that I carried on that belt when I started this video series. It's not even the same pouches. I've got different pouches that I've made since I started this video series. So things evolve. As you learn skills, you might have a tool that you thought was essential before, but maybe you learn how to get along without it. So you take it out of your kit. That is natural. Work on your skills, develop your knowledge, test the things that you have. Don't take things out and think, well, I think this would be great. If you've never used it, you might not want to rely on it in a survival situation. But the good news is you can test it out anytime in your backyard, at a local park. All your bushcrafting stuff, you can walk anywhere and find a stick that's been blown down by a storm. You can pick it up. You can try to build a trap trigger. You can do anything, right? Use little moments in time to practice your skills. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Thank you guys for sticking out for this kind of a rambly video about gear and equipment. Hopefully next time we'll be back outside and we'll be stepping back into the actual books and source material to talk more about the skills that Aragorn demonstrates. So until then, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.